I've lived on Juniper Lane for 18 years, long enough to see the maples grow tall and the neighbors grow gray. It's a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of place where dogs bark at mailmen, and the air smells like a mix of cut grass and barbecue on Saturdays. I bought the house when my kids were still in middle school. Now they got families of their own. But I stayed, not because of the view or the convenience, but because it feels like the last piece of something I built with my late wife, Janet. I keep the place neat. Not perfect, just respectable. I mow the lawn every Sunday, repaint the shutters when they fade, and take out the trash every Thursday night before pickup. And that, believe it or not, is where my trouble began, with a trash can. The can itself isn't anything special. Black plastic, a bit scratched up with the city logo stamped on the front. I've had it for years. But to one person on this street, it was a personal offense. Her name was Karen Delaney. You could spot her from a block away. Neat blonde bob, sunglasses the size of a salad bowl, and that permanent pursed lip expression of someone who believes she's keeping the world from collapsing through sheer disapproval. She'd moved in 2 years ago, right after her husband's company struck some deal that apparently gave her enough time to micromanage the entire neighborhood. She became president of the HOA within 6 months. At first, she seemed harmless, a little pushy about aesthetic cohesion and property standards, but I'd seen worse. Then came the first notice in my mailbox. Dear Mr. Lawson, your trash can is visible from the street after pickup hours. Please ensure compliance with HOA guidelines, which require bins to be stored out of sight within 12 hours of collection. I remember reading it and laughing. It was Thursday afternoon. The garbage truck had just come by an hour earlier. I figured she was just overzealous. I moved the bin into the garage and thought nothing of it. The next week, I noticed something strange. Thursday morning, before pickup, my trash can was lying on its side, lid open, garbage scattered like a raccoon's picnic. I figured it was a raccoon or maybe the wind. I cleaned it up and went on with my day. But it kept happening. Week after week, I'd wheel the bin to the curb Wednesday night, and by morning it'd be knocked over again. Bags torn open, coffee grounds everywhere. Banana peels like landmines across the driveway. I bought a motion light, thinking maybe an animal was to blame. The first night I had it installed, I woke up around 3 a.m. to that sharp click, the light turning on. I peeked through the blinds and froze. There she was, Karen, in her robe, walking her little white dog down the street, or pretending to, and with one quick kick, she knocked over my trash can. Then she bent down, pretending to check on her dog, and strolled off like nothing happened. I didn't know whether to laugh or lose my mind. The next morning, I waited for her. She was out front trimming her roses, like she always was, even though they were perfectly trimmed already. Morning, Karen. I said, casual as could be, you wouldn't happen to know who's been knocking my trash can over, would you? She looked up from her clippers, eyebrows arched behind those sunglasses. Oh, I've noticed that. Such a shame. Maybe you should get one of those weighted lids. Or better yet, keep it out of sight. The HOA has been getting complaints. I almost laughed right there. Complaints, meaning her. Well, I said, if you see anyone messing with it, let me know. I always keep an eye on things, she replied, voice sugary sweet and sharp as glass. From then on, it was war, not the loud kind. The quiet, neighborly kind that festers under the surface. She'd find the smallest things to nitpick. My mailbox had a tiny rust spot. Notice in the mail. My Christmas light stayed up a day too long. Warning letter. She even complained about my American flag being too faded. But the trash can was her favorite. Every Thursday morning, same routine. Knocked over, garbage scattered. Every Thursday evening, same smug look when she saw me cleaning up. Now, I could have called the HOA board, but that's the thing. She was the board, at least the part that mattered. Her husband was always away on business, and the other members were either scared of her or too lazy to care. So I let it go for a while. I had better things to do. But then one Thursday, after a long night cleaning up a mess she'd made, I got a letter taped to my door. Final warning. Failure to comply with HOA regulations regarding refused container storage will result in fines of $50 per day. That was it. That was the moment I decided enough was enough. Now, I'm not a man who goes looking for trouble. I worked 35 years in construction before retiring. I've learned that when things break, you fix them quietly. But sometimes quiet doesn't cut it. Sometimes you have to make a point. I spent the next week thinking, watching, waiting, and then one afternoon, I got an idea. Simple, legal, and just clever enough to make her choke on her own rules. I went down a hardware store, bought a few things: plywood, metal hinges, a motion sensor, and an old steel drum I found at a salvage yard. I spent 2 days in my garage, sawing, welding, and painting. When I was done, I had something that looked exactly like a regular trash can, but wasn't. See, this one had a surprise. Under the lid, I'd mounted a spring-loaded hinge connected to a little air compressor. When someone hit the can or kicked it hard enough, the lid would pop open and trigger a puff of harmless, non-toxic blue chalk dust, the same kind used in construction marking. It wouldn't hurt anyone, but it'd make one heck of a mess. Thursday night came. I wheeled my new trash can out to the curb, same spot as always. Then I sat by the window, lights off, coffee in hand, waiting. At 2:47 a.m., motion light clicked on. There she was, robe, slippers, dog leash. She strolled up, looked around, and gave Ken a swift kick. Whoosh! The lid sprang open. A cloud of bright blue dust exploded into the air, and Karen screamed like she'd seen a ghost. She stumbled back, tripping over her dog's leash, covered head to toe in blue chalk, her hair her robe. Even the dog looked like it had rolled in paint. I couldn't help it. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the couch. She ran back to her house, coughing and flailing, slamming the door behind her. The next morning, I stepped outside to get the paper. There were faint blue footprints leading from my curb straight to her driveway. The whole neighborhood had seen them. By 9 a.m., everyone was talking. Mrs. McLean across the street was watering her flowers when she said, "Did you hear Karen had some kind of accident last night? Poor thing. Looked like a smuff when she took her dog out this morning." I just smiled. That's so. Around noon, there was a knock at my door. It was her. Sunglasses on, but I could still see the faint tint of blue along her jawline. "I don't appreciate pranks, Mr. Lawson," she said sharply. "Pranks?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Someone's been kicking over my trash can for weeks. Maybe they finally got what was coming." Her lips pressed tight. She looked like she wanted to scream, but couldn't find the right words. "You've made a fool of yourself," she said finally. I shrugged. "Couldn't have done it without your help." She turned on her heel and marched back down the driveway. After that, my trash can never got knocked over again. But I wasn't done. Not because I wanted revenge. That part was already satisfied. But because I started thinking about something deeper. See, I'd spent years keeping my head down, letting people like her run the show. Folks like Karen always think they're doing what's best for everyone, when really, they're just afraid of losing control. Maybe it's loneliness, maybe it's pride, but it spreads like rust through a neighborhood. I didn't just want to win a petty war. I wanted peace for everyone on Juniper Lane, not just me. And that's when the real plan started forming. The funny thing about neighborhood gossip is it spreads faster than wildfire and burns twice as long. By Friday morning, every porch light on Juniper Lane was flickering with curiosity. You could see the blinds twitch when Karen's car backed out her driveway. Still faintly blue around the mirrors, I might add, and by noon, the story had already mutated into legend. Some said she was attacked by a raccoon. Others said the city sprayed her for trespassing on municipal property. My favorite version came from old Mr. Peters at the end of the street. Heard she got into a fight with a paint truck. Hope the truck's okay. Now, I didn't confirm or deny anything. I just went about my business, mowing the lawn, repainting the mailbox, saying my polite hellos. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, neighbors started talking to each other again, really talking. People who used to stay behind their trimmed hedges were laughing over fences, comparing stories about Karen's rules. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she'd been pestering. Mrs. McLean, sweet widow in her 70s, said Karen had fined her for having wind chimes that were too loud. The Ramirez family had been written up for parking their teenage son's truck too close to the curb. And the Finches, who just moved in, got a warning about their unapproved porch furniture. It was ridiculous. Folks had been too polite, too afraid of causing a scene, to say anything before. But now, seeing the queen of the HOA walk around with blue streaks in her hair had done something magical. It cracked the spell. Still, I knew better than to think she'd just give up. Karen was like a wasp. You swat her once, and she doesn't fly away. She circles back angrier. Sure enough, the next HOA meeting was scheduled for following Wednesday. Normally, those meetings were sparsely attended. Just Karen, her vice president, a nervous man named Dale, and maybe one or two residents who couldn't think of a better excuse to skip it. But this time, half the street showed up. I took my usual seat near the back, arms folded, watching as Karen cleared her throat and clicked her little laser pointer against a slideshow of community standards and future goals. Her tone was tight, controlled, but there was something brittle about it. It has come to my attention, she began, that certain residents have taken upon themselves to undermine the decorum and safety of our neighborhood. Someone in the crowd coughed to hide a laugh. Karen's eyes flicked toward me. I would like to remind everyone, she continued, that the HOA exists to maintain order and harmony. Without structure, this community would fall into chaos. That word, chaos, seemed to hang in the air. You'd think she was talking about a war zone, not a street lined with hydrangeas. When she opened the floor for resident comments, I raised my hand. Slowly, calmly. "Go ahead, Mr. Lawson," she said, jaw tight. "Appreciate that," I said, standing up. "Now, I've lived here almost 2 decades. Paid my dues, followed the rules. But lately, it feels like those rules have been less about harmony and more about control. Wouldn't you agree?" She blinked. "The rules are designed to—" "Right," I interrupted gently. "Designed to keep things neat. But sometimes the neatest neighborhoods are the ones where people stop being neighbors and start being scared. Scared to hang a flag, plant a flower, or let their grandkids ride bikes because someone might complain." A quiet murmur rippled through the room. I could see heads nodding. Karen's voice went sharp. "Are you suggesting we abandon the bylaws, Mr. Lawson?" "No," I said evenly. "I'm suggesting we remember why they were written in the first place. To help, not to punish. Maybe the HOA should spend less time looking for flaws and more time building community." That did it. The room came alive. People raising hands, speaking up, telling stories of their own frustrations. For the first time, Karen wasn't in control. When it was over, she didn't look at me, just packed up her papers and stormed out, leaving poor Dale to clean up the mess. Later that night, as I sat on my porch sipping tea, Dale came walking up the street. He looked uncomfortable, glancing around before stepping onto my driveway. "Evening, Dale," I said. "Everything all right?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah. Look, between you and me, that was something tonight. You really got folks thinking." "Good," I said. He hesitated. "Thing is, Karen's talking about filing a complaint. Against you. Says you're a threat to HOA integrity or something." I laughed. "A threat? I'm a retired carpenter with arthritis, Dale." He smiled weakly. "I know, but she's serious. She's drafting a petition to remove you from the association. Says you're spreading hostile sentiment. Thought you should know." I nodded, thanked him, and watched him walk off. A part of me wasn't surprised. I'd embarrassed her. And people like Karen, people who build their identity around control, can't stand losing it. But I wasn't going to fight her with more tricks or lever devices this time. No, I had a better plan. Something that'd show her what real community looks like. That weekend, I made some calls. I talked to the Ramirez family about hosting a neighborhood barbecue. Open invite, no HOA permission required. Mrs. McLean offered to bring pies. The Finches said they'd set up games for the kids. Even quiet old Mr. Peters said he'd drag his guitar out of the garage. We decided on Saturday evening, right on Juniper Lane. Folding tables, lawn chairs, and laughter spilling out from driveways. By 5 o'clock, the smell of grilled burgers and ribs filled the air. Kids ran around with sparklers, dogs barked, and for the first time in a long while, Juniper Lane felt alive. I was flipping burgers when I saw her. Karen stood at the end of her driveway, arms crossed, lips pressed so tight they could have cracked glass. She watched as people laughed and ate, and didn't need her permission to do it. After a few minutes, she turned back toward her house. But just before she went inside, I called out, "Hey, Karen, you're welcome to join. Plenty of food left." She didn't even look back. That night, after the last lanterns went out and the laughter faded into soft crickets, I found a letter taped to my door. "Mr. Lawson, your unauthorized street gathering violated HOA regulations regarding public use of common areas. Further noncompliance will result in formal disciplinary action." I stared at it, then folded it neatly and slid it into my pocket. I didn't feel angry this time, just sad. Sad that someone could live surrounded by so many good people and still choose to be miserable. Sunday morning came bright and clear. I was sweeping my porch when I noticed something odd, a moving truck parked in front of Karen's house. Two men were loading boxes into it. At first, I thought she was having work done, but then I saw her, hair pulled back, wearing jeans instead of her usual press slacks. She looked tired. We locked eyes for a moment. She hesitated, then walked over, leaving us. I asked. She nodded slowly. "Mark took a new job. We're moving to Clearwater. HOA there needs a president." I almost smiled at that. I bet they do. For a long moment, we just stood there. Then she said quietly, "You made your point, Mr. Lawson. Maybe I went too far." "Maybe," I said softly, "but it doesn't have to be too late to learn." She looked down, then back up. "You know, that barbecue looked nice." "It was," I said. "You'd have been welcome." She gave a small, brittle laugh, the kind that breaks just before turning real, then turned and walked away. By noon, the truck was gone. Her house sat empty, blinds closed, like a stage after play ends. For weeks after, I'd catch myself glancing at her yard out of habit. The roses wilted without her constant trimming. The mailbox leaned a little. But strangely, the street felt lighter. Neighbors kept the barbecue tradition going. Every month or so, someone would host. No rules, no fines, just folks being neighbors again. And one evening, as I sat in my lawn chair watching the sunset turn the sky orange and pink, I thought about that silly blue trash can. Funny how something so small could set off a chain reaction that fixed something bigger. Maybe that's how life works, not in grand gestures, but in small stands. In the quiet moments when you decide enough is enough, not out of anger, but because you remember what matters. Janet used to say that kindness isn't about letting people walk all over you. It's about knowing when to stand firm and when to open your door. I guess, in the end, I finally understood what she meant. And as for the trash can, it still sits by my garage. Doesn't get knocked over anymore. But every once in a while, when I roll the curb, I can't help but smile, thinking of that puff of blue dust and the lesson it left behind. A few months passed after Karen's moving truck rolled out Juniper Lane, and life slowly settled into a rhythm again, a better rhythm, if I'm honest. The air felt lighter. Neighbors waved more, lingered longer at mailboxes, and nobody was afraid to let a little imperfection show. The next HOA election came and went quietly. Dale, the same poor man who used to flinch every time Karen cleared her throat, was voted in as the new president. The man could barely string two sentences together without apologizing, but everyone liked him because he listened. That was new for Juniper Lane. He stopped by my house one evening with a clipboard and a shy grin. "Figured I should do things right," he said. "Wanted to ask if you consider joining the board." I laughed. "Dale, I think I've had my fill of politics for one lifetime." He chuckled. "Fair enough. Still, you kind of started this whole neighborhood revival, whether you wanted to or not." I shrugged. Didn't plan on it. Just wanted to be left alone. He nodded. "Yeah, that's usually how good things start." And maybe he was right. Because it wasn't long before Juniper Lane started to feel less like a collection of houses and more like what it should have been all along, a community. We had a fix-a-day once a month where everyone helped prepare something. Fences, gutters, mailboxes, whatever needed doing. I'd bring my old tools out and teach the younger folks how to mend things instead of replacing them. You'd be surprised how many people had never swung a hammer before. There was something beautiful about it. Neighbors helping neighbors, sweat mixing with laughter. It reminded me of the kind of life Janet and I used to dream about when we first moved in, before HOA letters and noise complaints ever existed. And the best part? Every time someone said, "We should check the rules on this," someone else would say, "Nah, let's just ask around first." That was enough. That was trust. One Sunday, I was repainting the porch railing when a car pulled up across the street. A sleek silver SUV. Out stepped a woman in her 40s, holding a clipboard, looking up and down the block. For a second, my stomach dropped. Old habits die hard. But then she smiled, waved, and started unloading boxes. A for sale sign came down from Karen's old yard that same afternoon. The new owner's name was Lisa. Single mother, 2 kids. One in high school, one in middle school. Within a week, her boys were out riding bikes with the Ramirez kids, and she was baking cookies for the block barbecue. Funny how quickly a house changes when the spirit inside it does. Life rolled on that way for a while, quiet, steady, good. I spent my mornings reading on the porch, afternoons tinkering in the garage, evenings swapping stories with the neighbors over lemonade or beer. And sometimes when the sun dipped low and the light turned gold, I'd think about Janet. She'd always been the calm one between us. Where I saw problems, she saw people. She'd remind me that everyone's fighting something you can't see: pride, fear, loneliness. You can't fix people by yelling at them, she used to say, but you can show them what good looks like. I used to think she meant that in a simple way: be kind, be patient. But standing there, years later, surrounded by laughter and music on Juniper Lane, I realized she was talking about something deeper. She meant that the best lessons aren't taught by words or rules. They're taught by example. One evening, around the start of autumn, I heard a knock on my door. Not a sharp, angry rap like Karen's used to be, just a soft, polite knock. When I opened it, there stood a delivery man holding a small package. "Delivery for Mr. Lawson," he said. I wasn't expecting anything, but the label caught my eye. Clearwater, Florida. No return name, just an address. Inside was a small box wrapped in tissue paper. When I pulled it open, a faint puff of blue dust rose into the air, that same chalky blue I'd used in my little prank. And beneath it was a note, written in neat cursive. "Dear Mr. Lawson, I suppose you could say I finally saw things from your side. The HOA here didn't need a president after all. They needed neighbors. Thank you for teaching me that, even if it took a messy lesson to get through. Karen." I stood there for a long moment, staring at that note. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did a little of both. That night, I poured a glass of whiskey and sat on the porch, holding that note under the soft porch light. The crickets sang. The wind rustled through the maple leaves, and for the first time in a while, I felt a sense of peace settle deep in my bones. People don't change easy, not really, but sometimes they do. Sometimes all it takes is one small thing that knocks the pride loose and lets the light in. A week later, I framed that note and hung it in my garage above the workbench, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that every fight, every frustration, every puff of blue dust had led to something worth keeping. Because the truth is, we all have a little HOA Karen in us from time to time. We all want control. We all forget to see the human being standing on the other side of the fence. But it's never too late to remember. That winter, we had the biggest neighborhood Christmas party Juniper Lane had ever seen. Lights strung from roof to roof, carolers wandering up and down, kids making snow angels in the cul-de-sac. Someone even dressed up as Santa and rode in on a lawn tractor. At one point, Dale clinked a spoon against a glass to get everyone's attention. "Hey, everyone," he said. "Just wanted to thank Mr. Lawson here for reminding us what this place is supposed to be. Without him, we'd all still be living under rule books instead of real friendships." I felt my face flush as people clapped and whistled. I waved them off, but inside, something warm stirred. Not pride, just gratitude. When the crowd thinned and the night grew quiet, I stood at the end of my driveway, looking down the row of glowing houses. Snow sparkled under the porch lights. Laughter echoed faintly through the air, and I thought, this is what home is supposed to feel like. Later that night, as I rolled the trash can the curb, the same old can, scratches and all, I paused and chuckled. For old time's sake, I tapped the lid twice. No blue dust this time. Just the creak of hinges and the hum of the street finally at peace. Then, out of habit, I looked down the base of the can where a tiny blue smudge still clung to plastic. I let my fingers brush against it. A memory frozen in color. Guess we did all right, huh, Janet? I whispered. The wind rustled through the trees, soft and low, almost like an answer. As I turned to go back inside, I saw lights flicker across the street. The Ramirez family setting up their new flagpole, the Finch kids chasing each other with snowballs, Lisa hanging a wreath on her door, each of them waving, smiling, calling out, "Night, Mr. Lawson!" And I realized something I wished I'd understood sooner. That community isn't built by rules or regulations, or even by the people who try to control it. It's built in the quiet moments of understanding, the shared laughter, the willingness to stand up for decency without losing your kindness. So maybe that's the real lesson of the blue trash can. Not that revenge feels good, though it can, but that sometimes standing your ground is the kindest thing you can do. Because kindness without backbone isn't kindness at all. It's surrender. Now, every Thursday morning, when the garbage truck rumbles up and the driver waves at me, I tip my hat and smile. And every once in a while, when I see my reflection in the garage window, gray hair, tired eyes, but little spark left, I think of how a small act of defiance turned into something worth living for. We spend our lives building things, houses, families, routines, but what really lasts are the lessons buried in them. And for me, it all started with one stubborn man, one meddling neighbor, and a trash can that taught us both how to be human again.